All right, taken care of. Got your notes out. We're going to continue with the age of Jackson. And if you would do me a favor, when you ask questions, get your paper out, Joe. When you ask questions, make comments, whatever, would you say it loud enough so that it gets on the microphone? When I edited it yesterday, I had to edit a lot of dead space because the mic didn't pick you up. So please don't let that discourage you from asking questions, because that really adds to the audio and the lecture when other people who is not here can listen to those side questions. All right, so we are going to take a look at Andrew Jackson. This is not what he looked like when he was president. He's much older here. But his hair is very similar to what you'll see in every picture that he's ever seen. When I say picture, I mean a painting. This is one of the first pictures he's had taken of him not long before he dies. Okay, so a little bit about Andrew Jackson. He is probably most famous, especially in American folklore, as the hero at the Battle of New Orleans. About 2 weeks after the War of 1812 ends, remember, we don't have Facebook back then, communication is very slow. They have no idea down in New Orleans that the war's over. So he's got his Tennessee forces down there. Great Britain has their forces, and they have a battle. Very much overwhelming odds. He had, 800 men. British had some odd thousand, maybe as many as 4,000. I can't quite remember. The whole point of it is he was greatly outnumbered. Now, of course, the battle was had been forgotten in history until Johnny Horton in the 1950s wrote a song called The Battle of New Orleans, which I'm going to actually play for you. It was #1 for 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. That was a big deal back then. And you're going to see, it is quite comical, but it was the folklore song of the time.
That's the one that's like the British kept coming.
Yes,
Yeah.
You try not to laugh, but it is actually a good song. I enjoy listening to Johnny Horton. He's Big John is another folklore song. But a couple of aspects about him. He's the first president that we've had up to that point who never attended college. All the other ones had attended college. Now, Washington didn't, but he was formally educated. He didn't need a college education. He gave himself one. He considered himself, as Americans did, as the common man.
So back in the day in college, did they have the names for it, or did they just say college?
Oh, no. Harvard is the oldest college here. You had Harvard, you had Princeton, which actually was King's College. You had William and Mary College. Oh, yeah, many of them still exist today. He's also considered Jeffersonian. So, from a political standpoint, he is not a federalist. He wants small government. He wants very little or a very weak central government and strong state government. That's why he's a Jeffersonian. He represented himself as the common man. As I reread about Jackson in preparation of this school year, I cannot help but think Donald Trump, including the campaigns. The campaign that he went through was far worse with the mudslinging than Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton went through. But Donald Trump touts himself as the common man. His biggest supporters in this country is blue-collar workers. It's the middle class, the lower middle class at that.
So George Washington was the only one that killed anyone for president, like
Back to Jackson here. Comparison. I believe there is a huge correlation to what we see today with President Trump and his campaign and how he has appealed to the populist to Andrew Jackson. I'm not kidding you. There is so many parallels, and in some cases nearly identical.
Every time we compare him to Trump, it just makes me think about he would say something just like Trump.
I think if we was to read his transcripts, we would see that. I'm not kidding you. There are so many parallels to his presidency, what he represented to Trump. It's unbelievable.
So he had a hat that said, "Make the colonies great again."
They weren't colonies at that time. They were independent nation states. But that was, without saying those words, his philosophy. By getting rid, by reducing the federal government's power and getting rid of the National Bank, which we'll get to. So, Johnny Horton. So here's one of the famous paintings of the Battle of New Orleans that was done to kind of make him the hero of the battle. So hold your applause and enjoy this, what is it, 5-minute song? So, if you had an iPod back then, you would have had that, or I guess it's not iPod anymore, is it? What do you guys, iPhone? Yeah. You would have that song on it. And that's what you'd be listening to. That was a big deal back then. So, but it did revive a lot of historical research into Andrew Jackson and kind of brought him back to the forefront. So, one of the first things that started marring his presidential activities is what's now called the Peggy Eaton affair. Remember, he's already been accused of being an adulterer, marrying his wife while his wife was still married. So now we got this issue. So she was the Secretary of War's wife. She was shunned very early in Washington, D.C., and he was trying to, this is the story anyway, was trying to make it so that people were more accepting of her. But because of this relationship, remember his wife is dead too, so people could easily equate an affair going on. And I put in here, she dies during this time period, by the way. So it really, in fact, he blames his rivals for his wife's death over this kind of stuff. Why? Because she was really tore up by it. And when you're already sick and you get the extra stress of this, it is going to do a number on you. In fact, most doctors will say if you can remove most of your stress, you can heal yourself without medication.
How do you remove stress?
It's hard to say what it was. Back then, it's hard. They didn't know half, a quarter of what we know now disease-wise. So, could have been bad water, that could have been typhoid. It could have been any number of things back then. Do we know anybody who's been accused of an affair?
Bill Clinton.
Right now. Yes, well, he's not only been accused, but that was proved. That was proven. Huh?
Monica Lewinsky?
Yeah, that was Clinton.
Clinton, yeah. Do I know him? Oh, my cousins.
No, not your personal life. President Trump.
Yeah.
I bring it up because you're going to see parallels to Trump's administration. Trump has been accused multiple times of having an affair.
I thought his wife looked too young.
That's not a reason you cheat, you dog. Anyways, back to this. So, it caused such an uproar, his vice president resigns. Which, by the way, people have called on Trump's cabinet and vice president to resign in protest. But Vice President Van Buren does resign over it. The next issue, and this here is his biggest mark on his administration. I particularly like Andrew Jackson except for this. This is such an egregious issue, the Indian Removal Act, that it leads to the Battle of Alamo and the Republic of Texas. David Crockett, in particular, he's a senator, and he is absolutely outraged at the removal of the Indians, particularly the 5 civilized tribes. And as a result, it's not the only thing he's discussed it with, but as a result, he ends up telling Tennessee, you can go to HELL, I'm going to Texas. And about 2 months later, he's dead because he gets killed at the Alamo. But that spurs the separation of Texas from Mexico into its own independent country.
That's what Mexico and fought, right?
Mexico and who?
And the United States.
Nope. That was not, that was Tejanos fighting for independence from Mexico.
Oh.
And about 2 months after, it was in April of 1836, that Sam Houston defeated Santa Anna and Texas gained its independence. 7 years later, the United States bought Texas.
Oh, okay.
All right, so the 5 civilized tribes. They're called the civilized tribes because of all the natives in this part of the United States at this time. We're not talking about Western, the Plains Indians. We're talking about the Eastern Indians. These were the ones that was accepting of the English culture, was trying to assimilate. They were learning the language. They were converted into Christianity. They were building homes. They were leaving their native lifestyle and becoming civilized. Andrew Jackson don't like natives at all. And he doesn't care. He orders the deportation of these natives to what is called the Indian Territory, later to become Oklahoma. Most of them do not make it. It's where we have what comes out of the Trail of Tears. Over the next several years, these natives are rounded up and most of them are forced to walk from the eastern part of the United States all the way to Oklahoma. Many of them die before they get there. And these natives never come back. In fact, I know there's still some Cherokees left. There's some Choctaws and some Seminoles. I don't know about the others. They may be, or they have already been assimilated DNA-wise into the larger culture, American culture. But nonetheless, this is in fact, a lot of natives won't even take a $20 bill, because that's whose face is on the $20 bill. Andrew Jackson. They will not take it out of protest. Now, I find that a little odd, because how many years ago was that? Almost 200 years ago. And there's really no, I don't know. It's, well, yeah, it didn't. Trust me, a Native American today is far better off than he was 120 years ago. Far better off. But the way in which it was done, that's the egregious part. The way it was done is the egregious part. It most certainly did not live up to our principles in the Declaration of Independence. Was it eventually going to be, well, I don't think, most historians don't think it should have ever been done or needed to be done with these particular tribes. Now, with the Plains and the Western tribes, that's a different case. But these tribes were already complying and being assimilated and enculturated into the American culture. So that is what made this so egregious, is they did nothing. They weren't resisting. And but the mere fact he wanted to open up these lands in the South for further development. And of course, there's a lot of hatred. He killed the Red Sticks War, which I think we're going to see a quick video of. He annihilated, I don't know, I can't remember, 1,000, 2,000 of them. Indians, just basically a slaughter. So, but the Indian Removal Act of 1830, the 5 civilized tribes are sent to the Indian Territory that is later called Oklahoma. By the way, they were promised when they get there that it'd be completely free of white people. And in 1907, it becomes Oklahoma, and no longer free of white people. So another lie that our government gave them.
It is just like him.
Well, how is that? What's he lied on? Who is he deported, rounded up and deported? No, he isn't. Congress is. Congress is. He has no power to deport anybody. Congress has created the law. His job is to execute the law. Here's the map of where these different native tribes came from and where they ended up. So the Seminoles come from down here, and they were transported by ship across up into Oklahoma. And you can see these different territories. These are counties now, by the way, by these names up here. And there it goes. It's a little slow. My family, I don't want that. Come back here. My family from Indiana, if I can see it on my small screen here, right up in here. Okay, it is thought my 4th great grandma on my dad's side is Cherokee. We're not sure. We've got one photo of her, and we know for a fact she's native. But what she is, I don't know. We don't know for sure, because to be an offspring of a native was a very bad thing to be. In fact, you in the Westerns, you'd hear them called half-breeds and stuff like that. And my grandma, my dad's mom, would never refer herself as anything but what was called Black Dutch. Black Dutch is, if you do a Google search on that definition, is a kind of, not a derogatory term, but another term to refer yourself to as being of native descent without disclosing yet that you were native. Does that make sense? So you have to explain why you got such dark skin and black hair. You know, because natives typically have dark skin, brown, maybe even if they're out in the sun, that's where they get the name redskin. Their skin actually will, I don't know how many natives still have this pigment about them, but they actually will have kind of a reddish tint to them. But where are you from? You don't look German to me. Germans are quite white. They look a lot like me. You know, it's, I have a lot of German genes. I don't have the native. My half-brother, who lives in Nevada, he has a lot of the native gene in him. He's dark skinned, black hair, very clear what side he takes favor of. But Grandma Laura May would only say she's Black Dutch. She would never admit that she had native in her. And that's just how it was back then. So we move into a nullification crisis. Now, I'm being very simplistic during this time period. I think we're going to end up watching I think it's a 55-minute documentary on Jackson that goes into a little more detail. I'm giving you just an overview, if for no other reason than we just don't have time to go into the details. But we do have an issue that's called the nullification crisis. Now, it starts out, the nullification, let me get my slide changed here. Whoops, didn't want to go that far. Come on, catch up. The nullification starts out, or nullification crisis really starts out with the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, 1798. Now, and it came out of the time period when John Adams was president, and Congress passed and he signed into law the Alien and Sedition Act, which outlawed, made it a criminal offense, and in fact a felony, if you criticize not just the federal government, but the president himself. There was a newspaper editor who wrote an editorial against John Adams because of this, and had made fun of him being, basically he said his rotundancy, meaning he was fat, and he was sent to jail for that. So we have James Madison, and James Madison wrote it for Kentucky. Virginia's resolution was written by Thomas Jefferson, declaring, in essence, that states had the right and the duty to declare unconstitutional those acts of Congress which the Constitution did not authorize. So states could declare something Congress does as unconstitutional if it does not align up with the Constitution. And northern states did this as well. Southern states did this as well. And this leads us to the Civil War. And there are states today doing this. Now, most attorneys and most judges do not agree with this philosophy. They believe the only entity that can declare something unconstitutional is the United States Supreme Court. But the states do not, at this time, do not agree with that. They believe they always held the right to nullify. And James Madison, the father of the Constitution, writes the Kentucky resolutions to that fact. And of course, the Jeffersonian, represented by Thomas Jefferson, agrees with that. So what happens is South Carolina meets to decide on nullification of the tariffs of 1828. So the tariff of 1828, or what South Carolina called the tariff of abominations, taxed as much as 50% of imported goods. If we had to pay today 50% of a tax, say if an item that comes into Idaho costs $100 and we have a 50% tariff on it, that's $150 you have to pay. We gripe about 6% sales tax. Could you imagine 50%?
It's weird because when last time I went to Oregon, they don't have tax.
That's right.
So it's like, so when I'd hand them, like I bought something that was like $1.90 something, I handed them $2. They gave me back like 2 cents, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm confused as all hell.
Now they make up the difference in property taxes.
I know, but it's just weird because it's like not solid, just dollar, like
Right.
It's just like it has changed with it. It's so weird.
Yep. So we have this tax problem, which of course, keep in mind, the Southern economy is based on raw materials, cotton, tobacco, other farming produce, it gets sent out to either New England or Great Britain, France, other countries. It becomes a finished product and is sent back to them to be bought. That's when they get taxed for it. This destroys the economy. And this isn't just in the South. This tariff actually affects the North as well. But it in particular hurts the South. Now, this is important for you to realize. This is the first major tariff of this magnitude in the South, imposed on them by northern individuals. In other words, there's a majority northern control in the House and Senate. Can you extrapolate where this might lead? Just thinking forward a little bit. Northern controlled Congress imposing tariffs that in particular hurts the Southern economy, either purposely or unintended consequence.
War.
Rem-
I forgot the name of it, but it was the North versus the South.
yeah, the Civil War.
Oh, Civil War, yes.
But it wasn't called Civil War until 1907. We'll get to there. But be thinking about this sets the stage, ladies and gentlemen, nearly 30 years before they ever start shooting at each other.
There was a lot of wars back then.
There's a lot of wars. There's more wars today than there was back then. Far more people die in war today than they did back then. Take Mr. Abel's Cold War history. You'll find out that more people died in peacetime under communism
Yeah, starvation.
than any other time in history combined. Some of it was starvation, some of it's just flat out murder.
So much for peace.
Yeah, communism. Oh, there's wars all over the place.
Yeah, there's a war we don't even have business with. America will go over there.
I think we're starting our 20 years with the war on terror. What do you mean you don't know that one? That's the one you're going to go fight.
ISIS. For real? Hell yeah. You get drafted.
You're either going to fight it over there or you're going to fight it here.
I'll go over there.
Well, that's why we fight over there, so we don't have to do it here. So the next issue we got is the bank veto.
That kind of reminds me of Mr. Abel's class, because when you say go fight over there, not here, it's like no dying in the classroom.
That's right. Don't die here. Don't go out in the hallway. I don't have to do the paperwork. That's right. Bank of the United States. The Hamiltonian system is now in place. There has been a push from very early on to have a national bank. And that had been resisted until this bank charter was created. It was like a 2 or 4 year charter. It had to be renewed. Well, Congress wanted to continue the Bank of the United States, a nationally ran bank. He vetoes the bank charter. He says it is a private monopoly. Now, think about this for a minute. I'm always trying to point out the correlations to history to what we see today. Do we have a private monopoly bank today?
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't know, but I have different
Okay, I'm not interested in feelings. I want facts.
We do.
Who? You say we do. Is it Wells Fargo? Bank of America?
I want to say Wells Fargo.
Huh? U.S. banks? No.
Government banks?
Huh?
Something like the banks for the government or whatever? Something like
Kinda, but there's a name for it.
that? Federal?
Close. That's part of it. Who's got money on them? Who's got a dollar bill?
Shit, I don't know.
Pull it out. What does it say across the top of it?
The United States of America. I don't know. Federal Reserve note.
There you go. It is the Federal Reserve is our private monopoly bank today.
Federal Reserve note.
Yep. What you're holding is not money.
It's an
It's an IOU. It's a note.
It's weird how like a piece of paper that's green has a number on it, has the president's face, just worth anything. Like
It only has value because you and I agree that it does. It's called fiat money or fake money. There is no value behind it. I have money in my drawer that has gold or silver value to it. That's what our money used to be attached to, is gold value. So you could you could exchange that piece of paper for $1 worth of gold. You can't do that today with the money, with your notes. But Jackson, is against private banks. Why might he be against private banks? Well, to start with, one of the things, the problem is that this bank is the bank the United States government used. So here it's a private bank, and it's getting deposits from the federal government. All the taxes it collects goes into this bank, and this private bank then gets to use it for their benefit. That's a problem. Those who are running the bank are very corrupt. They're giving loans to their friends and not to the average guy. In fact, he called it, he had a name for it. It was a hydra of corruption. A hydra is a Greek mythology, a many-headed snake whose heads grew again as it was cut off, killed by Hercules. So this bank, with its multiple fingers involved in the economy, could twist and turn and influence the economy in ways that benefited some, but not the majority. That's what today we call the Federal Reserve. You have individuals in Congress like Rand Paul, his dad Ron Paul, who's now retired, and most libertarians in Congress do not want the Federal Reserve for the very same reason. Now, we're not going to get to it in this class, but in World Issues we will, where we will take a look at the 2008 meltdown, where our economy nearly collapsed because of what the Federal Reserve was doing. And it's still not resolved. The big question still is, has the Federal Reserve only kicked the problem down the road? And you and your generation two-party system. So we formally go into a two-party system during his administration. We have Jackson supporters who call themselves Democrats. This is the birth of today's Democrat Party. You have Henry Clay, and his supporters are called Whigs. The Whig Party is the old Federalist, John Adams, George Washington types. The Democrat Party are the Jeffersonians. They're the small state or big state government, small federal government people. In some ways, today's libertarians. In some ways, it's not a straight across comparison, but most certainly would be more libertarian than the Federalist. So the Whigs want a strong central federal government. Democrat Party wants small central federal government. I will probably ask you, what party did Andrew Jackson belong to? Can anybody tell me?
What Andrew Jackson was?
Yeah.
Jeffersonian. And then they became the Democrats.
At this point, they're Democrats. What I did here was to show you understand the transition from Jeffersonians to Democrats. They no longer call themselves Jeffersonians.
Democrats.
They're Democrats. Yep, they belong to the Democrat Party.
Hey, wait. The Republicans and Democrats always have those symbols? Like the elephant and the donkey?
The elephant and the donkey. I don't remember when no, the donkey was something new. They used the donkey to make fun of them, the Republicans did, and then they went and took it. Oh, fine, we'll take the donkey.
Isn't that where they always have their head in their ass?
That is what the Republicans was making fun of them about. Yep.
The elephant, what the elephant is.
Who's going to defeat the elephant? Okay. So in Jackson's second term, he was able to defeat and abolish the National Bank. But we also have a problem. There was a lot of land speculation out west going on. A lot of people made loans based on speculating of values increasing, and it didn't happen. So land prices inflated, prices of goods and services inflated, but the economy is dropping. Moreover, in order to purchase lands, you had to buy or use gold and silver. That was in part due to the national bank going away. He wanted the banking system, our currency system, to be based on hard currency, gold and silver, not paper money that can be printed and devalued by the banks. You can't devalue gold and silver. It is what it is. You can't make more of it artificially. You have to go and find it. Paper money, like our money today, like our Federal Reserve note, just can be run through their machines and print more. And more money that's printed, the value of the dollar decreases. That's why in 1998 I could buy a gallon's worth of gas for 98 cents. That gallon of gas has not changed. It's still a gallon. What's changed is the value of the dollar. It now takes more of it to buy that same gallon. 1975, going to Alaska, our dad complained about 25 cents a gallon.
What?
Where today would be like, oh, all day?
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, he's used to paying 5 and 10 cents a gallon.
What?
When you went to the movies, it cost you 10 cents. What's it cost now?
$10.
10 freaking dollars. And that's if you want to go hungry.
Well, I mean, that's why you sneak in your own food.
Well, I do that too. But the point is, the movie hasn't changed. It is the value of the dollar that has.
So like soon the $20 bill is not going to be worth that much?
It's not. 10 years ago, your school districts passed a levy to pay for this building. Every year, CASA receives about $50,000 a year from that levy to maintain this building. The inflation rate in 10 years has been 14%. So we still get 50,000, and I'm giving you a round number, 50,000, but it does not pay $50,000 worth of maintenance anymore. It's 14% less. So so at some point it's not enough to cover it as it is. There'll have to be more money requested to pay for it.
Got like new ones for those?
Huh?
Like the new bills that we have, like hundreds? Not that you got new ones or something?
No, they created new ones because they're harder to counterfeit.
Oh. Oh.
Nope, there's nothing wrong with the old ones. It's just they're easy to counterfeit. These are very difficult to counterfeit. Now you have to know which. That's why at a store sometimes they'll run a pin across it. That's a anti-counterfeit device.
I just see them like hold it up to the light.
Yes, there's markings in it. They can do that too. There's multiple ways that they can check for counterfeit now that a copy machine cannot duplicate. So that's why we have the new money now. So they have it's a pretty cool system. All right, so these bank notes, like your Federal Reserve notes, dropped in value, which created the first major depression in the country. First major Great Depression in the country. Because the banknotes, the currency, was not based on gold and silver, when the bank closed, when Jackson did not allow the bank to be rechartered, those notes lost a lot of value. So there's some chaos starting to happen now. Unintended consequences. We're still taking notes here? All right, that jumps, again, I'm being very simplistic on what's going on here. So that leads us to the election of 1836. The resigned vice president is nominated, and he wins. This is him at a much later date, I think 1860 or so is when this picture was taken. But even when he was younger, he had the poofy hair.
Why do all have hair?
Style. Yeah, exactly. They're not taking baths every day. Check your hair out when you get out of the bed in the morning. My beard's all over. I have to get in there and wash it and put some stuff in it, and it still half the time is going crazy. That's why in the 1800s, they actually use oil. You'll see like Wyatt Earp when he's got some pictures without his hat on. His hair looks like it's flat, and that's because they use hair oil, and it's a deodorizer.
I feel like that would make it worse though.
It would in my hair. My hair is naturally pretty, I could strain it out and run an engine on it or something, but it's either that or the smell. I mean, remember, they're wearing multiple layers of clothing, and it's hot, it's humid. Oh, I couldn't imagine the stink. Let's go see what Hip Hughes have to say here.
We're hitting you up with an exciting election. This time it's 1836. Martin Van Buren, what are you doing? You can win the presidency, but not before the Whigs try to split the vote 4 different ways. How's that for a hot one? So giddy up to the London, guys. Let's get her done. So let's look at the Jacksonian Democrats. Of course, the Democrats were born out of Andrew Jackson around 1828. He wins re-election in 1832, and Martin Van Buren is now his vice president. Martin Van Buren is from the state of New York. He's a Democrat. He's a great political organizer. He's a political machine. He knows what he's doing, and he wants to be president. And although he's not completely loved in the South, remember he is a Northerner, he wants to continue the traditions of Andrew Jackson. And with Andrew Jackson's blessings, that's going to go a long way, especially in some mid-Atlantic states like New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and even New York. So Martin Van Buren is going to secure the nomination. He's going to bring along with him on this ride Richard Mentor Johnson. He is a politician from Kentucky, and he has a little bit of a background. Not only was he married to one of his slaves, who was a mixed slave by the name of Julia Chin, who passed away in 1833, but he was continuing on with other slave women. He actually was dumped by his next slave girlfriend, ended up shacking up with her sister, another slave. So Richard Mentor Johnson is going to have a little bit of some baggage that he's bringing along with him on this ride. So that's going to be the Democrats. They're solid. That's really a coalition party, mainly based in the South, but of course with Martin Van Buren, like I said, they're going to have a lot of northern support, especially in northern urban centers. But now we also have another party. How about that? Another party. I'm so excited. Welcome to the Whigs, baby. right, our southern nullifier, our kind of weird wing, that's just not gonna work out. He's only picking up 10% of the vote. He's gonna pick up Tennessee and Georgia, but that's pretty much it. That's where it stops. Now, Daniel Webster, he's gonna pick up 14 electoral votes. That's one, baby, and that's only because he only ran in Massachusetts. And then, of course, we have South Carolina. What do you do in South Carolina? You don't have a popular vote. Your state legislature's gonna pick your guy. Well, you're gonna end up really random. So that's gonna end up being 11 electoral votes. Only one state where we got like 2% of the electoral vote. So Martin Van Buren is the president, but I'm not done talking because the 12th Amendment kind of has a speciality where the vice presidential candidates are running kind of on their own ticket for vice president. They need 148 electoral votes, and Houston, we have a problem. Now, because of the 12th Amendment, the vice presidential nominees also are kind of running in their own spirited contest. They also need 148 electoral votes, and 23 electors from Virginia who voted for Martin Van Buren are going to become faithless electors. They're going to refuse to go with the will of the state. They don't want to vote for this Richard Mentor Johnson, right? Julian Chin, he's married to slaves. He's like, hey, I killed Tecumseh. You know that? Richard Mentor Johnson killed Tecumseh? It's a whole nother lecture. But at the end of the day, they're going to deny him the 148 by throwing their 24 electoral votes to Francis Granger, William Henry Harrison's vice presidential nominee. And that's kind of weird. You know, Virginia is refusing to vote for a Southerner. They'd rather vote for Granger, who's from New York, but that's going to deny that 148 electoral majority that Johnson needs. So it's going to get thrown into the Senate, not the House. The 12th Amendment states that if a vice presidential candidate doesn't get the majority of the electoral votes, it goes to the Senate, where Martin Van Buren is in charge. So at the end of the day, he's going to get his wish. Richard Mentor Johnson is going to become the vice president, but it's kind of an anomaly in American history that this vice presidential contest ended up being decided by the U.S. Senate. So there we go. We have Martin Van Buren, another Andrew Jackson term in a sense. He's going to ride it out to 1840, and then things are going to get shaken up even more. And you'll notice that even though we're in the midst of, you know, the Missouri Compromise, we're coming up to the Compromise of 1850 in a decade or so, nobody's really talking about slavery. You know, you have to remember that both parties are trying to kind of win on this coalition between candidates of the North and the South. So Martin Van Buren, even though he's from the North, has a lot of support in the South. He doesn't want to touch slavery with a 10-foot pole. He talked a little bit about banning it in Washington, D.C., but his policy is really to leave slavery alone. And of course, the Democrats are based in the South. They're not going to touch slavery either. But that issue that they're burying under the carpet, it ain't going nowhere. It's going to be coming back in a big way real soon. So giddy up for the...
An important part on the nullification piece that I forgot that he reminded me of, for an individual who is so strong for states' rights, he blew people's minds when he threatened to invade South Carolina over nullification. Invade with the federal army. Now, yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
Did Daniel Webster have anything to do with it?
Yep. His cousin is Noah Webster, who is the author of the first dictionary, which I have a copy of over there. And it is from there that the Webster family have been making dictionaries ever since. Now the family's not involved in it. They just have the name Webster Dictionary. But yes, they are part of that dynasty. Yeah.
So how do you come up with the dictionary? How do you know the dictionary? Know what people make?
Well, it came out of developing a unique American English. In fact, the dictionary says it's the American language, American English language dictionary, as opposed to British English. And so part of it was, what does it mean to be American? Do we have a separate language? Well, at that time, we spoke like all the other British. We even had accents like British. And so part of developing a new culture, a new country, is having your own language. Language, border, culture makes a country. And so Noah Webster took it upon himself to develop our first dictionary with new spellings to make it uniquely American. And that was the dictionary used for 80 years in schools. And then they updated it, and by then Horace Mann was involved with schools and made it from a religious perspective to a secular perspective. And so they did away with Noah's book because it was very theologically minded, and replaced it with a secular book. Yeah, over time, yeah. There's still some I meant to show this to you guys. There are a couple places in the Appalachian regions that still have British accents, that they have not lost the original, even how they talk. You can't hardly understand them. And same thing like with Cajuns. You go down there to the Cajun region, there's 3 different dialects in Louisiana. And it's really hard to understand some of them. In fact, if you ever watch Swamp People, where they go out there and gator hunting, got the one dude, you have to put subtitles up to understand what he's saying.
So
That's,
like natives too, like some natives have their own language. They don't have their own.
oh yeah.
They do?
Yeah, the Nez Perce has their own nation up north. The Blackfeet have their own nation down south. The Fort Hall Indian Reservation is their own nation. They have dual citizenship between their nation, those who meet the requirement. Not all natives meet the requirements, but if they do in fact meet the requirements, the tribe will bring them in as members of that nation, and they also are citizens of the United States. They're the only groups that have dual citizenship in this country. So, all right. So we talked about Van Buren. Oh, we didn't talk about so during his administration, Van Buren's administration, we again remember the Panic of what was the panic? Doggone, I can't remember the year of it. 1837, there we go. So but the crisis began before the election. Just like our financial crisis in 2008, it began. I seen it coming in 2003 when I was in real estate and I got out and went back to school. I knew it was coming. I said, there is no way. I took my last couple checks and paid for school for my first year. I lived on it my first year at school. I knew there's no way. There's a big crash coming. And sure enough, I was right. I didn't know when, but I was right.
You think there's gonna be another one?
Oh, you bet there is. Oh, yeah. This one will probably be worse. Depends on how long it goes before the bubble bursts, but it very easily could be worse because the Federal Reserve has already did all it can do. And in World Issues, we're going to study this. And even they admit they don't know if it's enough to keep it from happening again.
Is it gonna be like, you think it's gonna be soon? Like,
It'll be in your lifetime, probably in my lifetime. I think we're going to have a local housing bubble crash probably in the next couple of years, maybe sooner. I'm hoping sooner so I can buy a house. So if you guys are going to lose a house, let me know. I'm not buying right now because the pricing, there's no justification for the housing pricing right now. 4 years ago, my brother was $100,000 upside down in his house. He just closed last week. He made $75,000. There's no reason for his house to go that high. And he got full price offer. Where we moved from Nampa, my neighbor sold his house in 2 days, full price offer. There's no reason for housing to be. We even looked at a house in here in Wilder, just actually walking distance. They wanted $150,000. It's 100 years old. It's a dump. And they wanted $150,000. There's no justification for Wilder, Idaho to have a $150,000 home in town. There's just none. There's no job here. And that would be a big house here. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, there is a crash coming because there's nothing sustaining the home values. It's only a matter of time. So I'm hoping to be ready to pounce when that happens. So, all right, so let's take a look here. Okay, so part of this financial collapse, just like in our own Great Depression in the 1930s, banks close. When banks close, you lose your money. Now today, they have what's called insurance. They insure everybody's deposit up to $150,000. I think now it's $200,000. I think they've raised it since the last crisis. But the government will, now you might put $1 million in the bank, but the government's only going to guarantee you a certain $200,000, whatever it is now. That came out of some of the banking reforms of the 1930s because they lost all of their money in the bank. When the bank ran out of money, because people, when they seen the value was dropping, people what's called made a run on the banks, demanding all of their money back. Well, what people didn't understand is when you make a deposit to your bank, they don't keep the money there. They loan that money out to people to buy a house, to buy a car, to businesses.
Basically, when you put money on your debit card and you go spend it on something on eBay, you're just spending points.
Well,
Well, a debit card's your own money.
but let's say you put $100,000 in the bank. They loan that money out. Now they do keep a certain amount of reserve on hand for people who wants to get cash. So each bank location might have 10 grand sent in there for somebody, or maybe there is a dollar amount that they have to keep. But the point is, Wells Fargo in Parma may have $10 million on paper in deposits. But if I go to Wells Fargo to take a $150,000 home loan, guess whose money that really is? Your guys's. Everyone who's made a deposit. Yeah. And the bank turns around and charges me 6% interest on that. They're paying you 0.25% interest in your savings. So out of that 7% interest that I'm paying, you get a peanut, literally, because that ain't much for savings, but you get a piece of it for putting money in. They make most of the money they make the big money on the interest rate. Now, if I go bankrupt and don't pay it back, what happens? Let's say everybody goes bankrupt and don't pay their money back. The bank doesn't have any money to give to you when you go to take the money out. Am I being clear on that? I'm being simplistic here. It's a little bit bigger than that, but that's what happens. When people don't pay their money back, the bank don't have money to pay you when you come to get your money.
Like buy a house and like you don't have enough to pay like the bank back, something like take a house.
Oh yes, they're going to take it. But like in this last crash, they had so many houses they took back. People were living in it for 3 years without ever being foreclosed on because the banks couldn't do anything with it. They'd take them back, but so what? They couldn't sell them. Nobody could get loans. So they just let you live in it. It was better to have you live in it for free and let you keep the pipes up and running than do you walk away and let the pipes freeze. Literally, I walked into homes where they were totally destroyed because people walked out, left all the pipes there. It froze. Because if you ain't paying your mortgage, you're not paying your heat bill either. So when those pipes freeze and then they unthaw, there's nobody to turn that water off. I've seen houses literally be destroyed from water, which usually equates to mold. I walked into a house, the mold was so bad that I immediately had to turn around. I thought I was going to have to go to the hospital. I could not stop choking and coughing from the pores. Huh? Yes. Yeah. Around here, black mold's the bad one.
Like poison and stuff?
Yes, it'll kill you if you get too much. That's why I thought, man, I just got too big of a dose. It was bad. We were all three of us that went in there. We just like, oh my God. So there's no way you would save that house.
I was gonna say, imagine having to try to clean that up.
I don't know. The problem is you could try,
It would not.
but you have to disclose that by law that there was a problem with this house. And try to get somebody convinced that it's safe. I would never have my kids in the house. I don't care how clean it supposedly was. I know how. Yeah, you tear it down. That's what you have to do, tear it down.
There'd be no point in cleaning it though.
That's the point.
Exactly.
It couldn't be sold. The people wanted us to list it for them. Nope,
The bad
not
thing
going to
is
do
if
it.
you tear it down, it released all those mold spores in the air.
Yes. In fact, when you see old buildings be tore down, sometimes there's somebody with a big hose, water hose. That's to keep the dust particles down and not get it all airborne for people to breathe. That's all you could do with something like that is keep it wet and then haul it off. So to the dump. Gets in our water system. Anyways, so banks close. When the banks cannot make, when you cannot make your withdrawals because they're out of money, they close. And that's what happens during this time period.
That means I need to rethink my opinion on debit cards because apparently it's not your own money. What I thought it was like when you just buy a debit card, you just spend it like it takes it direct out of your bank account.
It is, but it's on paper in your account. It really isn't physically there. On paper it is. But banks gather up all their disposable money and loan it out. That's how they make their money, is on interest rates.
So that's, but you still have to pay a bill on a debit card or no?
No,
Oh,
no.
okay. That's probably why I prefer a debit card, because you'd never go in debt with it, like if you were to have a credit card.
Right, because you're right. It comes right out of your account and they deduct it.
That's what I was saying.
Right, but the money is there on paper. Mr. Moffett? Okay. Bye. Maddie, take your stuff, head for the office. You are out of here. So on paper, on a spreadsheet, your deposits is just a written number. The physical money probably is not there. It's being loaned out.
Yeah,
It's totally
but
off topic, but does your class count as a humanities class? 'Cause-
Depends if you need it or if you need history.
okay.
So history is required. So it's likely this is not a humanities for you, but your history requirement. Let's say you take Chinese history with me. That's not required. That is a humanities. And that would count as humanities credit.
but it's worth it because it's an amazing class.
Yeah, it is an amazing class too. Are you teaching that?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
want to take it again.
I think I'm either doing it next quarter or the third quarter. I can't remember now.
They would probably want to let me take
So.
it. I have too many international classes.
Yeah, you're a little behind on your English, aren't you? Yeah. All right. We're going to jump forward to the election of 1840, where we get my homeboy, William Henry Harrison. I say that because he's the one that defeated the natives in Indiana, which allowed my ancestors, and 2 years later, to immigrate to southern Indiana. So, we already got a little introduction about him with his vice president candidacy, Tyler. There is a famous campaign slogan, Tippecanoe and Tyler too, referencing William Henry because he beat Tippecanoe, which is the Indian chief in Indiana, to then be able to fully subdue Indiana and make it available for frontiersmen to settle. He does not live very long, in fact, only a month after he is elected president, and he dies, I think, of pneumonia, and then Tyler becomes president. So we do have a video we'll watch, I think, towards the end of class, and we'll come back to it. So the big picture of the Jeffersonian democracy. This is the big picture.
Wait, you go back to the second slide. I still haven't right now.
Oh. So just understand, he's a Whig. He is the symbol of the National Party of the Whigs. He would be what used to be called a Federalist. He wants a strong central government. He likes the ideal of national banks, paper currency. So big picture, the Jeffersonian democracy. First point, expanded suffrage. In other words, more people, more men, being able to vote. Not just landowners, but all white men of a certain age, which at this time was still 21. This is one of Jackson's big hallmarks, because he had the largest support from the common man. By 1850, from 1820s, it's about when this ideal started to emerge. We're starting to gain traction. By 1856, all states had made the switch. By 1856, all requirements of property ownership had been removed. Manifest destiny. This is a vocabulary word that nearly any history test you would see when you're dealing with this time period. It's a phrase that was coined in 1845. It is the ideal that the United States was destined by God to settle the West and civilize it, spread Christianity throughout the West. That is expanded later into the Philippines, into Asia. It's how we end up having the Spanish-American, one of the reasons we had the Spanish-American War, and the Philippines become a colony of ours. Manifest destiny. I will have to, by state requirement, require you to answer a question about manifest destiny on the test. That is a state standard. You will have to explain to me what it is. Why is it significant? This is the driving force of American policy for the next 100 years moving west. For the native, it's catastrophic in terms of their traditional cultural lifestyle. For America, it couldn't be better. Manifest destiny, especially those who actually were true believers, was a huge driving force. They really believed they were doing good, especially the missionaries. And for the most part, they were. There were some bad ones, don't get me wrong. There's bad in every group. But for the most part, the missionaries, they brought schools out to them. They brought medicine to them. They taught them how to farm. So if you can farm, which means you can eat better, and the mere fact that the West is going to be settled by European immigrants, the sooner the natives get on board with that and assimilate into the larger culture, the better off they're going to be. And the missionaries are at the head of this business. The other aspect is the spoil system. Yes. Go back one. Anthony, you taking notes? That's a lot to try to remember. Are we done? Manifest destiny, the ideal of manifest destiny, occurs way before 1845. It just, a name was not attached to it until then. In fact, it was a newspaper article. There was a newspaper editor that coined the phrase. Just like the Civil War. We didn't call it the Civil War during the Civil War. It was called the Civil War in 1907. It's when it started becoming used. Typically, it's the rebellion in the South. The South called it the War of the Northern Aggression. But it's typically the rebellion of the southern states or of the cotton states is always seen as rebellion, not as civil war.
I always thought about, like, you know, you could be, like, in that war, like, you could be fighting your friends, so.
Huh?
Isn't, like,
All right, so the spoil system, the policy of placing political supporters into appointed officers or appointed offices. We call this today political appointees. It happens in every branch of government, at every level. You all know what AKA stands for? Yeah. Do you remember the problem with the spoil system? Talked about it yesterday.
But they were switching the people that work in the government.
Okay, what is the problem with that? What can be a problem with that, I should say? It's not always a problem, but what is the biggest potential problem with that? Hello? It's a question to you all. I know the answer. I'm not asking it for my benefit. Huh? You're halfway there. Michelle, help her out. I see you're just dying.
Halfway out the door. Kennedy.
Incompetence. If you're appointing people who have helped you in some way, that doesn't mean that they know the job you're appointing them to. So if you take somebody out of a leadership position who's been doing the job for years and put somebody in who's never done the job, you've got a major problem. Now, one of the benefits of rotating individuals like Jackson did is they don't get too ingrained into the job where then you can figure out ways to be corrupt. That's one thing we're finding in the FBI right now is that those upper echelon folks, the top ranking FBI officials, the Comeys, the Strocks, and some of the others, they've been there for so long they know how to use the system and not get caught doing the things that they do. Had they been rotated more often, their game would have been upturned, or when they get replaced, the new guy would say, wait a minute, something's not right here. But because they've been ingrained in their positions for so long, they know how to cover up what they're doing.
That's crazy.
So it's a double-edged sword, the spoil system. But a lot of people help candidates for that very reason, to get that lucrative government job. Strict constructionalism. Favored limited federal power, just like the Jeffersonians. Jackson said he would guard against all encroachments upon the legitimate sphere of state sovereignty. What's interesting, while he was a huge proponent of states' rights, he did not believe the states had a right to nullify.
Mr. Prophet, can you go wash this off my hands?
Oh.
A bunch of graphite and stuff from the
All right. We will pick up here tomorrow.